The human had been wandering through the abandoned sector of the colony, a place the alien species called the Crimson Outlands, where the once bustling factories and supply depots now lay in ruin. Fires had long burned themselves out, leaving only charred skeletons of walls and twisted metals. The air was thick with the smell of burnt machinery and dust. He moved carefully, not because he feared anything, but because he had learned to respect the quiet stillness of a place that had once thrived with life. He wasn't supposed to be here. The patrols of his own people, the humans, had strict orders to avoid the out. They considered it unsafe. But he had not come for safety. He had come because of a signal, a faint, desperate signal from a small life form that had no one else to help it. It wasn't long before he found it, a child, small and shivering, crouched near a collapsed shelter. Its skin was pale and mottled, and its eyes were unusually large, reflecting the faint light in a way that made them seem almost luminous. The child stared at him with a mixture of fear and hope. "Hey," the human said softly, lowering himself to meet its gaze. He didn't speak the child's language perfectly, but he had learned enough to convey simple words of comfort. "You don't have to be afraid." The child hesitated, then in a small, broken voice said something that sounded like a plea. The human recognized the tone immediately. Hunger. He knelt and pulled from his pack a small ration pack. Humans carried these for long missions, and they were compact but surprisingly filling. He offered it to the child. For a long moment, the child did not move. Then, as if unable to resist the smell or the sight of food, it lunged forward, taking the pack with trembling hands. The human watched quietly, his eyes scanning the ruined area. He didn't want the child to be aware of his concern, but danger was never far in places like this. After a few minutes, the child had eaten enough to regain some color, sitting back and looking at him with wide, curious eyes. It was clear that it had not seen a friendly face in a very long time. "You're safe now," the human said, patting his own chest, then gesturing to the child. "Come with me." The child hesitated again, looking back at the ruins of the shelter it had called home, then finally nodded. Together, they began moving toward the perimeter of the outlands where the human ship was parked. He did not notice at first that they were being followed. Shadows moved among the collapsed structures, staying just out of sight, silent as predators. The human's senses, honed from years of field experience, eventually caught the faint sound, the low, almost imperceptible hum of weapons being powered up. He glanced at the child and gave a small shake of his head. "Stay close," he whispered. Before the child could respond, a figure emerged from behind a fallen wall. It was taller than the child, and its armor glinted in the dim light. The alien raised a weapon, its barrel pointed directly at the human. "Step away," the human said calmly, keeping his hands visible. "I'm not here to fight." The alien spoke, but the language was harsh and guttural, full of sounds that humans struggled to reproduce. The human could only guess from the tone that it was a threat. The child whimpered. Instinctively stepping closer to the human, he crouched slightly, placing a hand on its shoulder. "It's okay," he said. "I won't let them hurt you." The alien's weapon hissed, a warning sound that indicated it was armed and ready. The human knew he had only seconds to act. He reached slowly for his own sidearm, but he did not draw it. Instead, he moved in a fluid, deliberate motion, keeping his body low. His mind raced. Confrontation was inevitable, but he needed a solution that wouldn't risk the child's life. "Listen to me," he said, his voice firm. "We don't want to fight. I'm only helping the child. If you step aside, no one gets hurt." The alien's head tilted slightly, studying him. There was a moment of hesitation, and then a second figure appeared, larger and more heavily armored. It raised another weapon, taking a flanking position. That human realized immediately that he was outnumbered and outgunned. The odds were terrible. But humans had a way of surviving where others would falter. He knew the child could not fight, could not even run fast enough to escape the outlands if a firefight broke out. He had to make a calculated move. "I will not run," he said, raising his hand slightly. "But I will protect the child. Do you understand?" The aliens did not respond, but their stance softened slightly. Something about his unwavering gaze and calm tone seemed to give them pause. Then, without warning, a third figure appeared, sprinting from the shadows. It was smaller, quick, and nimble. It tackled the larger alien to the ground in a violent blur of motion. The human instinctively fired a warning shot, but the alien squad was already in disarray. From behind the cover of the ruined shelter, another wave of small, desperate figures emerged, the same kind of children as the one he had helped. They swarmed the area, brandishing whatever makeshift weapons they could find. It was a trap, the human realized with a jolt. The child he had rescued was part of a larger plan, a lure designed to draw intruders into the heart of a trap. But the human did not panic. Years of survival had taught him to stay calm even when every sign pointed to danger. He pulled the child close and shouted at the others, "Everyone, back. I won't hurt you if you stay back." For a long moment, there was silence. The human's reputation, he realized, sometimes preceded them even across species. They understood that he was not an enemy but a protector. Slowly, the smaller children hesitated, stepping back behind their fallen structures. The three armed aliens scrambled to regroup, clearly frustrated. They were stronger, faster, and more organized. Yet something about the human's presence and his refusal to yield disrupted their strategy. "Why are you helping them?" one of the aliens finally barked, its voice sharp with disbelief. The human looked at the child, then back at the alien. "Because someone has to," he said simply. "Because life matters." There was a long pause. Then, slowly, the aliens lowered their weapons. They did not leave, but the immediate threat faded. The human took a cautious breath, realizing how close he had come to catastrophe. He glanced at the child who was staring up at him with wide, trusting eyes. There was no fear now, only an innocent curiosity that made his chest tighten. He had made a choice, and despite the risk, he had done what he believed was right. "Come on," he said, leading the child through the rubble toward the outskirts of the "We're going home." The journey back to the human settlement was not easy. They had to move carefully to avoid patrols, navigate through crumbling tunnels, and find safe places to rest. But the human never let go of the child's hand, and in turn, the child never let go of his. Along the way, he learned more about the child. Its name, as best as he could translate, was Lyra. It had lost its family to raids from other alien factions, and its people had been abandoned by the larger governing council. Hunger and fear had been constant companions, and trust was a fragile, unfamiliar thing. By the time they reached the settlement, night had fallen. The human brought Lyra to the medics, who were astonished at how quickly the child had recovered after being starved for days. Lyra's gratitude was silent but profound, and in its eyes the human could see something that words could not convey: hope. Word of the rescue spread quickly. The human's actions were debated, discussed, and eventually celebrated. He had risked his life for a child of another species, defying rules, protocols, and even common sense. But what mattered most was not the debate. It was the child who was alive. The child who had learned to trust again. In the days that followed, the child became a symbol not of weakness, but of resilience. And the human, though he never sought recognition, had reminded everyone that life, in all its forms, was worth protecting. Weeks later, Lyra approached him quietly in the settlement's courtyard, holding a small, hand-carved token, a simple gesture of thanks in a language that transcended words. The human smiled, taking it carefully. "Don't mention it," he said softly. "Just stay safe. That's all that matters." Lyra nodded, the first real smile lighting up its face since the day he had found it. In that moment, the human realized something profound. Heroism was not about battles won or enemies defeated. It was about the courage to do what was right, even when the outcome was uncertain. Even when the cost was high, the memory of the outlands, the trap, and the danger lingered. But it was tempered by the knowledge that he had made a difference, that a small life had been spared because he chose to act, and sometimes that was enough. For the human, it was a reminder of why they ventured into the stars, not for conquest, not for glory, but for the chance to protect, to nurture, and to ensure that life, in any form, to have the opportunity to endure. And somewhere deep in the shadows of the those who had tried to ambush him would think twice before underestimating a human's resolve again.